So, Laura, did you want to start with bowls, or Terry, do you want to start with a prayer?
No, Laura, go ahead. Bowls are always so beautiful.
Everybody
Mm.
mute.
All right. Thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
Very nice. Well, we're here in our legacy interview series, and we're talking to Terry, Bishop Terry Riley, who's our past president. So, Terry, welcome. I appreciate your showing up for this.
Thank you. I know it again. I'm going to have to fire that secretary, but I'm not sure anybody else would want the job. So we'll we'll keep going this way.
Yeah. Well, normally I'll ask you a few questions, but then everybody gets to open up because they all have a personal relationship with you, so they might want to have some more specific questions. But I guess
Okay,
just
just
to start out, what drew you to the Madonna ministry? And before you even became our president, what was it that resonated with your personal spiritual journey?
so it's an interesting origin story. I started off in the spiritualist church around 1994 or so, and I studied mediumship there and was a platform medium for several years. And one day I was up giving readings, and there was a woman in the back of the church, and her name was Rosalie Carls. I don't know if many of you remember her, but she turned to the person next to her and said, she's going to be my student, and she being me. And so what ended up happening is I ended up studying with her. While while I was studying with her, the then president, or the soon to be president of the Madonna Ministry, came and did a channeling. And I saw the channeling, and that's how I met her. And then she invited me to several things that were going on. I was living in Arizona at the time. The ministry was headquartered, and I think it still is headquartered in California. So it wasn't that big of a jump to California. So that's really how I became involved. Shortly after that, Charlie handed over the ministry to its successor, Malon Willis. And once Malon took it over, there was she's a very administrative type person. So there was a lot of administrative things that were done in terms of tenants, in terms of creating um, various, always trying to run that thin line between not having dogma, but also having an understanding as to what we stand for, wanting to be inclusive, but then also deciding that, if what someone was doing was against any of the laws or moral turpitude or anything like that, we were always trying to walk that fine line. And to do that, we met like 3 or 4 times a year, sometimes in Arizona, sometimes in California. And I know Charlie will remember. And I don't think there's anyone else here on the call that was there. Shirley was there, but we would spend a weekend at someone's house just going over what we thought. And so it was a nice philosophical discussion that we had, and as always, trying to figure out how to bring the philosophy, the intent into the 3D. And that was always our struggle. And that's what we did in the 90s.
Very good. So while you were president, you had a career in government and you have a military background too. So I'm wondering, how did you balance your professional life with this spiritual side? And I think you had shared with me that you had to actually hide your gifts from your work situation.
Right. So um, it's kind of I've been thinking about it. I just retired after 42 years of government service and military service a couple of years ago. And so I've been looking back at it. Part of the thing that kept me in government was the stability, one. But number two, it was I always thought that I could bring something that wasn't there, that I could bring in the decisions that I was called to make and in the things that I was called to do. I could bring not only my intuition, but also my sense of guidance from spirit. And I very often did. And even before, um, I got into the ministry and started developing spiritually, had a lot of intuition I was a helicopter pilot. And I used my intuition a lot when I was flying. And I would, I was the only woman in many of my units. And everything that I said was always suspect. But I began to rely on my, instead of allowing myself to be questioned and questioning myself, I just allowed my internal guidance to develop. And in a couple of occasions, that worked out pretty good for everyone involved. So it was kind of a situation where I was developing spiritually, but also having to live very much in a male-dominated 3D world, and very much being kind of castigated for, not following the logical trend of thought. But I think, in the long run, I was always well thought of as doing a good job, always thought of as thinking of things in advance. And so that's how I was able to progress, was that people were like, yeah, ask her. After they would get through everything, they would be like, yeah, what does she think? And when that began happening, I knew that I could trust my intuition. I knew I was trusting spirit. And so I continued to as much as I could. And that's kind of why I stuck around.
Interesting. So were
Did
you
I
able
answer?
to mentor other women in that role?
There weren't any other.
There weren't. Okay.
No,
So you were
there weren't
isolated.
any other. And certainly I was with, it's very, the military is very kind of Republican right wing today. It was then. And people who know me know that I am anything but right-wing and Republican. So, and I would always, when my job got really tough and when I, was feeling like kind of a square cog in a absolutely broken round hole, I would try to find other things to make me feel like I was, contributing. So I did things like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Special Olympics, those kind of things that allowed me to still be able to contribute and fulfill myself even when things were tough. So um, that's kind of how I tried to do the balance. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not so, but yeah.
So during your presidency, we had to pivot as a ministry. And what role did you play in that? And how did you find the balance and make your choice between the more Christian side and the more interfaith open arms side?
Well, I don't know that we pivoted. I think that we continued the part that stayed with me. We continued on the legacy of the Madonna ministry.
Mhm.
We continued on with the interfaith community because there never was a dogma. Remember, we're always trying to figure out how to have be able to describe this beautiful 3, 4, 5, 6D um, concept of the interfaith community, the Madonna ministry, and bring it into the 3D world. And I think those of us who didn't break off and go the Catholic way, I believe that what we did was we strengthened not only our commitment to the universe, but I believe that we also strengthened our commitment to ourselves. And again, that was a very intuitive situation. And I was very much guided by spirit because it was very, very difficult on me. I had some pretty severe physical effects shortly after that whole thing.
Yeah.
As we were trying to settle, what really were we and what do we really believe in and can we tolerate this? And the situation became really clear after, there were some insinuations made, there were some insults made through email, and it those were hurtful. But at the same time, I knew they weren't true. And at the other same time, I knew it was time to let it go, let them go. So you may recall that there were several weeks of emails back and forth that we simply, as a ministry, did not respond to
Yeah.
because they were just not worthy of response. And so, and in the meantime, people like Paula, people like Sally, Diane DeLuna, everyone stepped up in order to support what we were doing. Charlie, I know that Charlie for a long time argued that we should come back together. But I think it was pretty clear at that point that the schism was far too wide and that we were never going to see things the same. And so we were going to have to develop as our souls led us, while they developed as their souls led them. And happily, I guess they're all doing very well, and happily, we're doing very well. So I think it was a good thing. It's sad when there's a breakup. It's always sad. And we loved each other very much, I think, as a community. But, again, the universe doesn't bring us challenges unless we have a way to overcome them. And I think that we were able to overcome them. And it wasn't always pretty, but it was always with a lot of heart and with a lot of love.
Yeah.
And so I think that's how we are able to survive as a community, whether we are millions in numbers or whether we're just a couple of dozen people. It doesn't really matter because our hearts are in the right place. Our integrity is intact. And I think that is so important, especially as we interface. That's our interface with the 3D world, is our integrity and our intention. And while some of us live in the clouds and miss dates and things, there's enough of us in the world that we can walk in both worlds. And I don't know if you understand how difficult that is. Some of us, we kind of knock ourselves on the head and go, what was I thinking? Well, you probably weren't. You're probably with spirit and everything's going to be fine. It's coming to this, it's leaving the how could you even think that way? How did you even do this? Why did you even do this? And moving into the, you know what, it happened. I'm not going to resist it. We're going to move on the way we can. If we find them again, we find them. If we don't find them again, we're still going to be fine. And so that's kind of the attitude.
Nice. So you've come back to us and you've been offering Fourth Sunday teachings, and you've gone through presence process and pendulum work and meditations, guided meditations. I've always loved those from you. So I'm
Thank you.
wondering, how did these practices evolve alongside your career path? And then what made you decide to eventually teach that openly?
Okay, so one of my biggest goals, and it's become even more prominent since I retired, is to develop spiritually. We've seen, and I think we're experiencing now, what the material development looks like. In the US, we've just had an election, and whether you agree or not, I think that we can really take some learnings and strengthen ourselves just by watching and praying and listening to our guidance and not resisting, but managing to hold the intention of strengthening ourselves spiritually. Because I really think, it's the age-old story of the bad versus the good, and good always triumphs. I mean, there would be no movies if there wasn't that concept. And I think that kind of is the theme of this world. It's trying to find the balance, trying to find, not to be so good that you fly and jump tall buildings with a single bound, but to find the balance where sometimes you fly and sometimes you stay on the ground and help there. And then sometimes you jump buildings in a single bound, and then sometimes you take the elevator. I mean, it's a matter of feeling the situation out, um, examining the situation with your soul, with your intent, with your integrity, and then taking the action that you see as being best at the time. And I think so many of us judge every single thing that others do, every single thing that we do ourselves. And then we always have that critic in our head, like, why did you even say that? And I know that's what I'm going to be telling myself in about a half an hour. I'll be like, oh my God. But but I'm trying to allow spirit to come through me, to answer these questions in a way that will not only help the 3D recording and preservation of history, but also to our resolve, strengthen our resolve to be the best people that we can.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to the question, you asked about why do I do all these things? Um, well, I think I was a natural psychic from birth, pretty much. Um, and that got me in a lot of trouble before I figured out the spiritualist church and was able to manage it a little better. And as I learned to manage it throughout my life and throughout my career. And one of the things that isn't struck me is it's not a learning, it's a managing, it's a remembering. We all have these skills. We're all born with these skills. And as a matter of fact, they're our birthright. They're the reason we're on this earth, is to try to integrate the soul with the physical. And it's not always easy. It's never easy, but sometimes it's beautiful. And so we strive for those moments of beauty, in between the moments of regret and pain, because, again, we're looking for this balance. And so my job is to develop spiritually as much as I can. And if that means dowsing with a pendulum, giving a psychic reading or a mediumship reading, or if it means remote viewing, whatever that means. And then showing other people or demonstrating for other people, passing that information on so that they can awaken themselves. And not only passing it on, but also learning from others so that I can help develop. So, that's part of why I see this ministry as being so fundamental to so many of us. And as a matter of fact, most of you know that my kids grew up in the ministry. I mean, they didn't know anything but the ministry,
Yeah.
until, after high school, when they kind of decided for themselves how they wanted to be. But it's a matter of learning from each other, not at great cost, not putting anyone on a pedestal, not not giving up any part of yourself in order to learn, but just to learn because it's your right. And that's why I pass the information on. I hope that some of it's useful, but in passing the information on, I also learn as well.
Mhm.
So, it's the balance, the teacher and the student balancing.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So, what about the timing of your retirement and now you kind of opening up to this new spiritual path in this new thinning of the veil timing? I mean, how does that fit into everything for you?
So, my retirement was not necessarily planned, but it was the right time. I'm not a good planner. Everyone who knows me knows that. Um, and I was actually planning to stay another year or so, but I had gotten a new boss. I worked for a three-star admiral, and he didn't support the mission uh, that I was a director of. I was director of uh, administrative investigations for the inspector general. And that mission wasn't, it took back burner. And so we lost personnel. We had more work than we could manage, and we weren't supported we weren't given the tools we needed to do our work. So I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to leave.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for them, I did leave, and they've had some difficulty filling my position since then. And it's been 2 years. But again, the the reason that we were so successful when I was there was because we were helping people, and I made that the the premier point. Do your work, but help people. And some of the things we did was we took complaints from uh, naval personnel about various administrative procedures, sexual assault. We had suicides calling in. And so my folks had the responsibility of managing each and every one of those calls, not knowing when the next call was going to come in. So part of what we talked about constantly was, how can you help? If someone calls and you're on the other end of that phone, there's no mistake in that. They're calling because the universe wanted them to talk to you. So never fear that you're not going to be able to say the right thing. Always understand that whatever you say, as long as you take a breath, is going to work. And we had a very successful and uh, very happy people working for me, just because the pressure was taken off to be perfect. And unfortunately, the environment, I think that much of business and government operates in, at least the old school business and government, is we measure by widgets. We don't think in terms of the squishy terms, because you can't measure them. You can't measure that you stop someone from doing suicide.
Right.
You can't measure that you help someone who had just gone through a difficult uh, situation with a loved one. Maybe we also dealt with some of the gender issues that were coming up in the Navy.
Mhm.
You don't know, you can't measure the impact that you have on people's lives. And so to government and business, that's not important. What's important is, what can we measure? We can measure the number of pieces of paper that come through. We can measure limit the time on the call to only, 5 minutes because we have another call waiting, all those kinds of things. And when those rules began to be put in place is when I decided that there's not anything more that I can do here. And so that's why I left. So in leaving then, that opened up time, obviously.
Yeah.
And for about 2 seconds, I was pretty worried about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. But then I realized I lived like an hour and a half away from the Monroe Institute. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to go down there and do some work? So I studied remote viewing there.
Yeah.
And met some great people. I took another remote viewing class there. And from there, I still have some people that there's an organization that looks for missing and endangered indigenous people. And I'm working with them. So we look for lost people through remote viewing.
Yeah.
So, you never know how things are going to work out. Another thing that I'm incredibly interested in is traditional Chinese medicine. I'm studying acupuncture and also something called guasa. Guasa, not the beauty guasa, obviously, but the guasa for opening your meridians. So it's a little bit different than acupuncture. And through doing that, I met these wonderful people in India. I studied with a man in India, and I've learned so much about guasa, about traditional Chinese medicine, about Indian culture. Um, let's see, I'm doing an Ayurvedic certification for Ayurvedic nutrition, and this is all through them. So again, I think that it's so important not to plan. I guess maybe this is where my non-planning comes into benefit. Not to plan, but to be open to the next thing, because I think that's what's happening now. I think that we can't no longer plan. Some of the institutions that we got used to depending on, uh, even the old theocracy, the religion, education, all of those institutions are falling, and it's up to us now to be open to what comes next and to allow ourselves to adapt and not resist the things that are coming to us. And so it's the same for the ministry. I would hope that it's the same for the ministry. I would hope that the ministry is keeping its reach open. It's keeping its heart open, because I see in the future, I see some amazing things happening. I see us becoming more, not that we're not relevant now, but becoming more known. And so I think that if we keep this gate open, we keep this, whatever you want to call it, uh, portal open for learning from the divine. I mean, I really think that is our charge and our duty.
Yeah. And what a gift you were when you were working in an all-male capacity, bringing that feminine archetype into the picture and wanting to truly help people. I mean,
Yeah, I don't
we've
know
seen
that
it in
they
the
would.
ministry, but my gosh, I mean, you did it in such a
I
big way.
Yeah, I don't know that they would see it that way, though. I mean, that's the thing. She was that pain in the ass woman, that we brought in because of DIE or whatever they call it now.
Yeah,
So, I mean, and that's I mean, it's such a good example of why we need to include everyone's talents, even if they don't fit.
yeah,
They don't fit the box we try to put them in. What are they good at?
right.
And that's what I think the ministry is exceptionally good at, is figuring out where someone's strengths is, and then allowing them to develop that strength in the safety of community.
Right.
And I really think that that's very important for us,
Yeah.
especially in the future.
And we definitely appreciate you coming to teach us what you're learning, because it's so much. It's like you're taking all these different courses and it's like, how did you ever have time to work?
I know, I know. Well, I am, anybody who knows me knows that I'm probably the epitome of ADD. I would be very smart if I could focus. And I think that, in feeding that need to always do something else, figuring that the need to find the next thing, to take the next logical step, even if it's not logical. Um, and, thank goodness that I have an interest, because I don't know what I would do if I didn't have these interests, and if I didn't have these outlets for finding, someone in India to teach me guasha, or, those kind of things.
Right,
So
right.
it's just been, I think once you take that step, I think the universe responds with a yellow brick road, right?
Yeah. No, and we're loving it too. Thank you. And we're hoping that you bring some more remote viewing insight into our world, but you also talked about animal communication. How's that going?
So, right. So, I am what I've learned from that. It's so interesting. I love the animal part of it. But the universe hasn't quite seen fit for me to be able to fit that in with everything else. Hopefully it will. But what I've learned from that is present moment. What I learned from that is really the effect that present moment can have, not only on a human soul, but on everything. I mean, from electronics to to animals, especially animals, because we share a common, I think we, in my world, my view, we share a common soul. We are weaves in the web of life, but animals with us, they so much communicate with us, but we don't always listen. And they have so many wonderful things to tell us if we only would listen. And from the animal communication, has come um, elemental communication, because I mean, it's the same thing. If we are able to still our minds, and that's the biggest hurdle, isn't it? Trying to still our minds. And one of the ways to do that is just focus on your breath, focus on a feeling, focus on a sound, and now you're in your body. And once you're in your body, there's nothing but you and whatever is with you. So if there's an animal there, you'll be able to open yourself up to what they're trying to tell you. If there are elementals there, maybe the trees, if you're in the forest, you can hear what they're trying to tell you. And make no mistake, and I believe this more than almost anything, is that everything around us is trying to communicate and help us to learn about ourselves, because that's why they were put here. And if we refuse to listen, then we go ahead and cut all the trees down, and we clear the land, and we go for that dollar. But if we just listen, we can find out how to live with nature, how to live with the animals, and how much better for everyone's soul is that going to be when we're not killing things just because they're in the way, or moving things because they're in the way, when our way is their way. And isn't that what most of the indigenous populations of the world have been trying to tell us? I mean, it's like we've come around full circle, and there's so much to learn. And there's so much to learn. And I think that the other thing that I think about, and I'm struggling with this a little bit, is, people study, people without indigenous backgrounds study to be shamans, or they study this or they study that, and then they take on the persona of that. And I think that is shortchanging not only the culture they're learning from, but it's shortchanging the culture they belong to.
Mhm.
Because if we can bridge, not necessarily go full into, but bridge those cultures, think about how amazing it would be if we could learn from each culture and then assimilate it with ourselves in our learning and our history, and then create from that space instead of trying to copy something someone else has done. And I think that's where we're moving. I'm hoping that's where we're moving as a global community, as a
Yeah.
world, is that we're able to take from each other the best parts, integrate them into ourselves, and then come up with something synergistically better.
Yeah, I agree. And you've talked about the frequency and raising the vibration so that consciousness can be there. And to me, that's the melting pot, isn't it? Is that we're all based on the same energetic origin. And that when we assimilate these cultures and honor them and respect them, that's seems to be the way, the path.
Right. And they so freely offer it to us. I mean, I think that's the thing. They've been doing it all along, and their gifts have not always been well received.
Yeah.
And again, I see that as a place where the ministry can actually step up and help with the assimilation, help, to meld this together. Because in reality, aren't we all, we all come from the same spark, the same frequency, but yet we're just a hair off. Because we're allowed our free will, we're allowed the way to project ourselves, the way that hopefully is within concert with our soul's essence, right? That's how we project into the world. And yeah, there's a lot of 3D stuff messed around that, and yeah, there's a lot of talk about trauma and you know disappointment and all the things that come with being on the earth. But isn't that the challenge? To take that trauma and that disappointment and melt it in with the shamanism and all the other things to
Mhm.
create something new out of it. That's true alchemy. That is.
I love that. So what would you suggest to other people who are going down this path of this rediscovery or maybe shifting in their lives in retirement or some other change in their purpose and path to find this way?
I don't know that I would be I mean, so I think that, again, as you move along the path, try not to judge yourself too much. I think we all have that voice. I don't know who it is, whether it's mom or dad or grandma. We all have that voice. It's like, why, how could you even dress that way? Did you really snort when you laughed? I mean, all the things that we tell ourselves, um, that's not coming from us.
Yeah.
It's not coming from our soul. It's coming from the imposition of societal norms that we can accept or not. And I mean, we have to, because we live here too. But by the same token, if we digress or if we make a mistake, why beat ourselves up about it? Why not just stop, take a breath, and say, okay, won't do that again. And you're gonna, but the next time, maybe you'll catch it sooner. I mean, it's all about being gentle with yourself, because you cannot be gentle with anyone else until you become gentle with yourself. Otherwise, it's just put on.
Yep.
And what we need right now in this world, I think the juxtaposition between sanity and insanity and misogyny and no misogyny and homophobia and no homophobia. I mean, there is so much going on right now, and everything is being raised. All of the worst characteristics of us are being raised. And we live in this soup. And so we're going to make mistakes. But if we can forgive ourselves, then we can forgive others. And if we can forgive others, then we can find the balance. Because to not forgive is to remain stuck. And if we're looking for balance, we have to forgive. And whatever ego it takes, and let me tell you, there are some things, even to this day, there's people, that I worked with early on in my career. If I saw them again, I try to trip them, just because, just because. My thing used to be I'd put tacks on their seats when they sat down, they'd sit on a tack. But but that's the human part, right?
Yeah.
If we are going to move ourselves in this world into the next dimension, which I really think, again, that's part of our goal, is, we're going to have to forgive the human part, allow it to a certain extent, but then always rely on our inner judgment and guidance, and trust it. I mean, that's the other thing. How many of us, wouldn't trust a doctor to tell us we had a fever, or wouldn't trust other people to tell us about ourselves, when in reality, they're the mirror of us.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to trust that whatever is in our life for a reason. And whether we like it or not, we're going to have to find a way to be okay with it and balance it out.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I want to open it up to others, but are there any questions we should have asked you or can ask you that you'd like to put on record?
No, I mean, I think that, in many ways, I'm grateful to Charlie for keeping the ministry going as long as he did. I'm grateful for Charlie for hanging in. I mean, he's seen so many different gyrations and iterations, and he's always been the stabilizing force, I think, in many ways in the ministry. And, I'm very grateful to Charlie, because I think my journey would have been much harder if I hadn't found the ministry, if I hadn't been able to find people who would accept me for all my quirks and craziness. So, that's what I think we should be for each other. And that's what we can be for others. I love Franz, who said, Madonna Ministry is a home for the spiritually homeless. And I really think that fit me. And I think it fits many of us.
Yeah.
And I think we have to remember there's others out there that are looking for a home.
Mhm.
And that we have to be there for them. That's all.
Beautiful. Thank you. Paula can tell you a story about somebody finding a home with us.
Yes, I was honored to give free Reiki at my friend's shop in a very poor town. So that's why we were giving it free. And I was talking to the other practitioners in between seeing people, and everyone who came in that day had never even thought about energy healing. They had never experienced it. So they were all in awe. And, just so this young woman comes in late, and we were in between, and we started talking. And I just happened to mention that I was also a bishop, among other things that I did. And she went, "A bishop? The Catholics don't have bishops." I said, "I'm not a Catholic. I'm spiritual." So she asked me about the ministry. And as I'm describing to her who we are and what we do, she burst into tears, threw her arms around me, and cried. And I said, "What did I do?" And she looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "You people are what I've been looking for. I
Oh,
need you. I need to join." So I invited her today, but I didn't send it till midnight, so I don't know whether she got it. But hopefully she will show up, because she is one of the most beautiful human beings I have ever met. Her healing method is something I have never seen. And when she was healing me, I was floating this high off the
wow.
table I was on. She is amazing. She does some sort of, she calls it voice healing, but it's almost like toning and channeling. It almost sounded Tibetan. Uh, but her spirit, I watched her work on everybody. She lit up.
Hmm.
And maybe I was the only one that could see that, but that's one of my gifts. So I think we will be blessed when she chooses um, to come on. And I wasn't going to go and do that. And Spirit said, "Yeah, you got to get there." So I have learned, when Spirit tells you to go, you always got a surprise. And she was definitely a surprise and a blessing. So, and that's what I have been asking for. I have been asking Arnold and Kay to send us who needs us, but also what we need, who we need to add to this beautiful ministry. So it's working, guys. Keep up the
Hey,
prayers.
thank you all. I've got a lot of insight from what I've heard this morning, and I appreciate it all, really, really, and the depth of what you're sharing. And your service to the ministry has been incredible. Thank you very much, Terrie. But my takeaway from all this is we're not an interfaith community. We need to scrap that. That's not what we are. We are a home for the spiritually homeless. And that will draw people to us. When you brought up the reasons why the Madonna ministry fell off and did their thing. And that's a faith community. And so they don't want to join our community. And I think other faith communities wouldn't be so interested in joining us. But the spiritually homeless people would be welcome here and with open arms. So I think we need to change our focus.
You may be absolutely right, Charlie. I hadn't thought about it that way. The only thing that I think about calling us interfaith is that it doesn't make us look like another one of those rabid religions, for lack of a better way to describe them. And it kind of, if there's another way to express the notion that we are open to everyone, that's what I think we tried to do with the term interfaith. So yeah, I mean, let's find out what that word would be, what we can do that's going to grab people and let them know that, hey, come on in. It doesn't matter what you've been or who you are or where you've been, join the community. So yeah, you raise an interesting point.
Yeah, and there's a lot of suspect around communities that are religious. A
I
lot of
agree.
suspect.
Oh,
And there
yeah.
are a lot of good people in the world that don't want to be part of a religion. Religion in itself means binding to something. That's what it means, to be bound to. So, in a way, what we're saying is we want to recognize the capacity of our souls to share itself. And that's more of an alignment process than a binding process. It's more of an awakening process.
Right. Right.
So we don't bind people to have to believe the way we do. So I think somehow we need to change what we put out there to the world, and that will help us bring people like Paula was just sharing that are hungry. They're hungry for like-minded people that will support each other.
Yeah. Any
And I
other
think,
questions of Terrie?
sorry.
I don't know, Nikki, this is your realm, but I mean, what if we had, do we need a Reddit dedicated to us that we can have discussions on? I mean, would that bring people in or?
I've been trying to discover what the magical location is because there are so many different places: Telegram, WhatsApp, Discord, Reddit, Stack, Medium, all these places. And we don't seem to be able to find that magic formula just yet. But we do have a marketing committee that's being a little bit more excited to contribute articles and content. And I wanted to ask you too, Terrie, because we talked about your website before, and I was trying to find a place to send people to find you. And it's like,
Oh.
well, we have the YouTube channel, so we're going to put a playlist of all of your Fourth Sunday teachings. But what do you desire in terms of publicity and having people find you out there for your gift?
So that is another thing that I struggle with myself. I don't know if I'm done yet, if I'm ready for prime time. I
Yeah.
sometimes wonder. Um, and I think I try to leave it up to spirit to bring people who I can help.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when that happens, they will come. But I've also been thinking about, I'd like to put some of the guided meditations up. Not that they would be beautiful or professionally done or anything, but I mean, I just think sometimes uh, the energy that comes through the one of those to me is amazingly healing. And I was just just putting it up there, if someone were to come into it,
Yeah.
they could be helped. So I don't know. I'm still thinking about it, but thank you for the question. I just I don't know what the answer is from my 67-year-old self. I just don't know.
We're trying to discover that for ourselves too.
I know.
Okay.
We are.
Where will we participate?
I know.
A lot of interest is in podcasting now.
Mm-hmm.
So almost you could almost turn something like this into a podcast, but there again, it would need planning, and there's nothing wrong with planning. It's part of the humanistic experience. We wouldn't have buildings, we wouldn't have streets, we wouldn't have automobiles if we didn't have some planning. So even though we're very intuitive, until we put that intuition into something more concrete.
I've started a podcast that is thankfully being assisted by AI. And so one of the episodes is one of Terrie's teachings on the soul retrieval. So there is a podcast episode for the soul retrieval.
Oh, very cool.
Book.
Cool. Thank you for that. I was just wondering if Truth Social had a place for us.
Oh, it's social.
Don't think so.
I don't think so either. It was a joke.
Oh,
Just
I
for
know.
the record, all your meditations are under a category on YouTube called meditations.
Oh, nice.
So
Okay.
anyone can go to that category, and anything we have done in the lines of meditation can be found there. So I could turn that into a podcast.
Oh, a meditation. Oh, that would be great.
Well, because with YouTube, you can assign a category as a podcast, and and I've done with Sunday morning services, but maybe I'm better off assigning a podcast to something like meditation.
Kevin, that's a great idea. And I love the word podcast because it sounds like a pod is a seed and it breaks open and spreads it out.
It's
Very
true.
cool. It's a great idea, Kevin. Thank you.
One question I had, and it's only because I'm not familiar with it. You mentioned earlier about platform mediumship. What's the difference between that and evidentiary?
So platform mediumship, and Paula can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a spiritualist notion of during a spiritualist service, the medium gets up and from the platform gives group readings. So would say there's a spirit here, and would give the evidence that the spirit exists, and then someone from the audience would then say, "Okay, that's my uncle," and then the reading would continue. They're very short,
Mm.
maybe 10 minutes at best, because it's just meant to prove the continuity of life. And that's why they do it
Okay,
during the service.
I've heard of that. I just didn't know it had a name.
That was it. Platform mediumship.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now the medium is not allowed to leave the platform. So I have to learn a new way of giving messages because I can no longer touch the members of the church, which really disconcerts me, but that spirit telling me it's time to learn a different way.
So Paula, do they still do hands-on healings though?
Yes, they
Okay.
do that, but the medium is not allowed to be one of the healers. She cannot leave the platform at all.
Well, there's an example of rules gone amok because I
Oh,
used to give
that's,
some of
yeah,
the best readings doing hands-on healing because the
right.
message would come through while you were touching them. Oh, that's a shame.
It
Yeah.
is. Because now that I don't need my basket of cheating cards because Spirit played a trick on me, touching their hands electrifies me and I get much better messages. And now that I can't do that, but fortunately, Jean Mandeville is giving a class this afternoon, which I'll be leaving as soon as we're finished, um, with a new way of not having to leave the platform. But I am sad because I like the contact with each one of them. But National makes the rules and they're all stuck with them. And
Wow.
they can't go individual either because they don't own their building. So, you do what you got to do. And I think it's just spirit saying, okay, Paula, this is where you're going next.
So
Like,
an example of what you learn compounding itself. I used to do hands-on healings back in the early 90s before I even knew what I was doing. And people tended to respond to it. They tended to like it. I never knew what I was doing, and I always had specific places I would touch on
mhm.
someone. And learning TCM, traditional Chinese medicine meridian system, I realized that a lot of the places that I was led to touch were actually the master points on TCM.
Wow.
So to me, it's more confirmation because a lot of I am very very Kevin mentioned evidential, but I very very don't veer too far off without knowing all the facts. I really like to understand what's happening, which is another reason why these classes are helpful to me because it helps me to get an understanding and just knowing that because you know yourself when you first start doing something, when you first start to trust spirit, when you first start to do healing, you're always wondering, is this just placebo? Am I doing this? Are they doing this? Who's doing this? I don't even know what I'm doing. Um, but I think, you know, it always felt right to do it. it always felt right. And I always waited, to be given some kind of guidance on where, someone should be touched. And so, but knowing that it was some of the master meridian points just makes me even more relying on spirit, makes me even more understanding of spirit and how they work through us, whether we know it or even like it or not, if we open ourselves.
So, Paula, that became a major issue for me. And that's why I left the Church of Religious Science, because it was a mind science, and you can heal spiritually through using the mind. It's the mind of God. But they didn't, and they got away from laying on of hands for the legal aspects of it, worried about getting sued and all that stuff. And when I quit that, it led me into my first depression, and it lifted within less than 24 hours. But it's the experience of that led me into meeting Arnold Michael and creating the Madonna Ministry.
And we're so
So you-
glad you did.
So you're telling me I don't have any idea what direction I'm heading in, but Spirit's guiding me.
That's
So
right.
thank you.
Just
Okay, I
fasten your
needed that.
seatbelt and put your helmet on.
Right.
Standard.
Because I'm got a new trike. Yeah. Okay.
It could be simple to just those people that are interested in what you do, to invite them into a private setting. Doesn't have to be in a temple.
True.
Terry, thank you so much for allowing us to interview you today. I so admire you. And I'll never forget when I came to your house, how impressed I was when I saw that newspaper article of you being the first woman helicopter pilot. That was just so impressive. And I'm just in awe of all that you learned. And I'm so grateful that you come and help and teach us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Laura. And I don't know how you saw that. You must have been digging through my drawers. No.
It was downstairs in the basement. It was downstairs in the basement.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So thank you for that. And
You're welcome.
again, it's spirit putting everyone in the place they need to be at the time. Where they're going to get the most, and where they can be of most of service. So yeah, thank you for that.
So that's the pioneering spirit.
Yeah, you go.
I
Thank
thank
so
you for
much,
being
Terry.
my
I
friend.
appreciate you. Go ahead, Paula.
Oh, thanks.
I just thank you for being my friend all these years and for being my mentor
Yeah.
and for sticking by us through thick and thin, because I happen to know what you went through in that split more than most people. And yeah, my prayers were always with you, and you know that.
Absolutely.
But thank you for coming back to us and being whatever part of us you choose to be. It's definitely a blessing. And we've learned so much, and don't stop teaching us.
Oh,
We
thanks,
still
Paula.
need you.
Well, thanks for asking me. And I had a reading the other day, and Diane came through. Yeah, she was such a hoot. This woman, she was a student medium, and she was telling me about this woman who was larger than life, who wore a uniform. And what else did she say about her? She said she was a compliment. We worked well together because we complimented each other. I mean, everything she said about Diane was true. And her message was just keep doing it, keep doing it. So I thought I would let you guys know that.
Yeah, that's
She was a
cool.
beautiful soul.
Oh my God, I miss her. Yeah.
Yeah.
We all miss her. But she's
Great.
still with us. We know that.
Yeah.
So what are we doing next week?
Next week, Kevin is up. We're having World AIDS Day, so he's going to be giving us a presentation.
Cool.
Oh, I thought you said World Eggs Day. I was.
Well, we could have eggs.
I know.
And
Okay.
Terry, I just wanted to say that I never really looked at trees the same way until I took a workshop on tree energy. And now I just, every tree I see something. You know, I see if it's old and crotchety. I see if it's
Nice.
young and vibrant. And it's just amazing how just one little workshop can change your life and the way you see
Right.
things.
Make you remember. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And Arnold Michael having the mystical experience with a pine tree. And there's more evidence of that with other members in our community. So
There's the
God's
whole
involved
mycelium
in all.
network. Yeah.
Yeah.
The root structure is the mycelium network, talks to everything. Cross-pollination.
You
Beautiful.
guys are awesome. I love this group. I really do.
Me too.
Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you,
week,
guys.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
everyone.
Much
Bye.
love.
Give my
Bye-bye.
love to Kate.
Yeah, I
Yes,
will.
for
I'm
sure.
excited. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a